Ashley.
Yolanda.
I'm so glad you're here, friend.
Me too, friend.
I have wanted to have a conversation. I mean, we talk all the time because even though like you're doing all these things in the world, we're just friends.
Yeah.
But I've wanted to have this conversation for a long time because we have so much to talk about. So let's just start where we start. We've been friends for 20 years.
We graduated in 99.
Don't tell people when we graduated.
It's more than 20.
Don't tell people how
20-ish
old
years. 20 plus. I think that's how you say 20 plus years.
Yeah, so I'm not telling anybody my age. I look really good for my age. We look great for our age. So let me start with when you think of like long-term friendships, 20 years is a long time for women. What do you think got us to 20 years of friendship? I remember being back in college. I don't even know if I knew we would still be in contact like 20 years later.
Agree. I think when you have a genuine connection and you're not expecting, like you're not trying to get something from the other person. You just like them for who they are.
Yeah.
And you have something in common. We had criminal justice in common.
Which is not a good
Remember we
thing
went to that
have.
Prison?
Oh, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Angola.
No, we visited a prison. I want to make that clear.
Yeah, we didn't go to
prison.
Technically, we did not go to prison. But if we had done that stuff, we would have been canceled today. But we'll talk about that in a second. But just our friendship has been a really long time. And we've had no problems in our friendship. It's crazy.
Except you didn't like me when you first met me.
Yeah, I wasn't going to tell people that. But the truth of the matter is when we first met each other, we absolutely... I
liked you.
I think it was me. I thought you were snooty.
I was quiet.
You were quiet, but I was like, she don't mess with anybody in here.
But you got to realize, I was a different college student because I had a child.
That's right.
So I wasn't, you know what I mean? My participation or my coming to class was different than other people.
You
because I still had a responsibility.
Focused. And I want to talk about that because that's one of the things I want to talk about is being a mother at a younger age. Like you had extreme focus. We'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the things I do want to talk to you about is like as a woman and just kind of growing and going through your career and meeting people in the world. What has friendship meant to you just as a woman, the sisterhood, the kinship, when you have friends that last, what does that mean for you?
I think people who appreciate you for the value you bring and you appreciate them and there's no competition. You understand, I'm happy for you, whatever you achieve, whatever your aspirations are, and I can have my own and then we can combine them sometimes, right? And we can talk about them. There's a lot in common, but I think what I've seen in my family or just friendships, people start to become resentful because, oh, she has this and I haven't reached that point yet. Instead of being happy and being inspired. Because I'll tell you a story, like when you first moved to Atlanta, I can't remember, but you lived far out.
I lived in Rex. It was so far out.
But you had a really nice townhouse.
I did. I remember.
And I just remember that inspiring me. It's like my friend is only in her 20s and she has this, I can. So I think when you look at it from an inspirational point versus like you're my friend, you're my sister, you're not someone I'm trying to compete with. Not that you should compete with anybody, but especially people who encourage you and you're on the same track. I think being happy for each other, different milestones, that makes it last because it's genuine.
I love that. I always tell people, like I didn't grow up with sisters, but like there are clear people in my life that I like consider sisters. And it's been, I think it's the thing that has gotten me through my life. And we just seem to end up wherever you, like Atlanta, why were you in Atlanta and why are we in DC together? Like we always end up in the same city. And I just think that's like divine.
I do too. It's a connection that
you can't break it.
You can't break it.
Yeah. No, it's a really good thing. So actually, let's talk a little bit before. So the podcast is on record, off script. So we're gonna put on record who you are because we want people to know that even though we're gonna be off script today and talking about a little bit of everything, that you the truth, friend.
I am the truth.
You are the true
Thank
friend.
you, friend.
And I'm so proud of you. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But let's talk about a little bit about how you grew up. And I'm going to kind of take a little bit of stock around like the church and growing up. So most people know this who know you. But of course, folks who don't, you're a preacher's kid.
I am a PK.
You are a PK. You know what they say about
in
PKs,
Alabama,
right?
So the Southern Baptist.
Southern Baptist. Y'all go to church all the time.
Yes.
So, you know, I feel like being a preacher's kid come with its own set of expectations. And people, you know, I didn't grow up where I was a preacher's kid, but I just remember the preacher's kids, like they could not do anything wrong. Right. Like what type of expectations you felt like growing up?
I think I always felt judged, or if you know, because my father was, you know, it was God, Jesus, my daddy, then me, right? Being as far as like the line of how you were judged. I remember one time I forgot my Bible, and I was like 7 or 8, and my Sunday school teacher, she like berated me in front of the whole Sunday school
because
class.
You forgot your Bible.
She's like, "Your dad is the preacher. You should always." And I remember, but I remember my dad defending me as well, because he had my dad's a pastor. He loves God, is very dedicated, but he had a very human side to it where he understood, you know, still be a person. Loving God doesn't mean you have to walk around like a robot, quoting scriptures all day. But I always felt like, even as a child, like friendships, when you talk about friendships, like as I got older, like people didn't like want me to come to parties. So like, you know, her dad's a preacher. You know, she can't come to the party.
They tried to take the invites from you.
They protected the invites from me. Gosh. But I think if all through my life, like, so as a kid, I always felt like I was kind of constrained, because I always felt like I was representing my dad in a way, or my parents in general, but specifically him with the church. And then, you know, he later became a city councilman. Yeah. So now my preacher dad is a city councilman.
So everybody knows him now.
Correct. So I always felt like a representative of someone else. And even to this day.
That seems hard though. That seems like it makes it difficult for you to be your own person, because you're not living for your father, but in many ways you are living in his shadow. And so that seems like it would make that very hard.
Because you love them, right? And so you don't want to embarrass them. So, you know, you try to be who exemplifies what people think they are. Right. Because that's not who my dad was. My dad is a very funny person. My dad is the best spades player you will ever come across.
Get on the table.
You know, he went to Alabama A&M. He's an alpha. He'll step in it. So he's different from what people perceive, but there was an image I always felt like I needed to uphold for the family's sake too, not just that. Because my mom was very clear, you know, this is what a pastor's family, this is how you dress. This is what you wear.
Oh, I hate that. This is how you dress.
Yeah. Oh my God. This is how you dress.
Pressure. And as a woman, you want your flexibility to come into your own. But you gotta be buttoned up all the time.
Let me tell you, some friend, it can be below 15 degrees. I'm not putting on pantyhose to save anybody's life. Because Mama, I'm like, why do we have to summer, spring? It didn't. Alabama
made you wear.
It could be 154 degrees.
Come on, Mama.
You're gonna have on a slip and some pantyhose because that's what you.
Yes. Oh my God, Jesus. That just seems so hard to me. I think that would have been most difficult for me, is trying to like give the persona, whether it's dressing or whether how you speak or going to a party, a college party or whatever the case may be. It just would have been super hard. So I'm proud of you. You made it.
Hard. But on the converse, like I felt like I had a special connection to God. Like, you know who my daddy is.
So, you know, throw those blessings
personally, throw those. I'm okay because, you know, my dad's connected. But no, seriously, it was. As a kid, when people have expectations of you and you just don't feel like you can be a kid or to feel judged. Like I knew what being feeling the feeling of judgment early on. Yeah. And like that isn't a good feeling.
Did that make you more or less judgmental of people like now I think less. As an adult?
I give people, sometimes to my fault, but I'll give more of a benefit of the doubt sometimes than I probably should because I can recognize the layers of people. Yeah. And sometimes people bring a representative, right? Or they're being a part in what they know or playing a part of what they know. Yeah. So as I've gotten older, I think I've kind of let that go. But definitely in my teen and my 20s, I think I was probably much more forgiving of behaviors and different things because I was trying not to be so judgmental.
Do you think that because you grew up, I mean, so it's really funny because we talk about this all the time. I always say, like, whenever I need some spiritual guidance, I always be like, Ashley, what's the word? You know, what's the word? But do you think that if your father were not a pastor, that you would have so much faith now? Or do you think you would have always found your way to, you know, a strong faith?
So, because even when he wasn't a pastor, he always, and I'll be quick, but he always told this story of, he was the youngest of 7, only one to go to college. His mother cleaned houses. His dad worked on like a railroad. And he tells the story of one summer he worked his senior year. He made $40. He gave $20 to his mama for a light bill, paid $12 for a bus ticket, and showed up on A&M's campus with $8 in his pocket.
Shut up.
And I remember that story. So that's what really taught me faith. Before understanding your dad's a preacher or pastor, he always told me that story. And that's just always stuck in my head because it was about perseverance and just doing what you needed to do, like in the beginning. To get to whatever your end goal was.
Before, I want to get to like putting your bio on the script because I think it's just so amazing, the work that you've done. But before we get into that, I would just imagine that being a preacher's kid and having people always looking at you or eyes are always on you, and you became a mother a very young age, not young age, but in your were you a teenager?
Young.
How old were you?
I got pregnant at 16. I had her at 17, so relatively young.
Yeah, you were. But what was that like to, I mean, I remember having friends who were teenagers who also got pregnant, and it felt like the world had judged them unfairly. I couldn't even imagine if you were growing up in a household where your father is a preacher and, you know, the city council person. How was that? Even though your daughter is the light of your life, like how was it growing up in a space where now you're being seen as the preacher's kid and now being a young mom?
The amazing part of that story is my dad, this is a true story, he got up before the church. So, you know, back in the day, I don't know if you remember, if you got pregnant, the mother had to come before the church and ask for forgiveness. Know. Yeah, in certain Baptist churches. Okay. Not the father. But the teen mother or the single unwed mother, I'll put it that way, but particularly teens, you had to come before the church and ask for forgiveness. My dad stood in the pulpit and he said, my daughter will not be coming before a church asking for forgiveness.
I love that.
And he stood up for me and he said to me, so I was a junior, because I got pregnant at 16, I had her at 17. He said, I expect you to still go to college. So I still had the support. So while I was dealing with, you know, what people were saying, I feel like my parents, both of them actually, made me feel like my life had not been so altered that I could not still achieve the things that I wanted to. That while it wasn't the ideal situation, certainly, you know, the ideal situation of what I was taught, I didn't feel doomed, right? And I had a great extended family. My aunts, my cousins kept my daughter for me while I went to school. Everyone just expected her paternal grandparents. They expected, and her father went to college as well. Like his parents were the same way. Like, no, we're not breaking the script. We're not going off script.
No, we're not. We're not.
Everybody's going to school and getting a job.
That's right.
Staying focused. So having that level of support, and that helped me not to be, when you talk about not being judgmental, that was one of the things too, because I clearly recognized my situation as a teen mother is not that of most teen mothers.
It's completely different.
Right. Having the support, having my parents say, you're still going to college, we'll still support you, having families step in to make sure that I attended class. I understand that's not the norm for a lot of young women. So that to me was a wake-up call as well. You have to appreciate being blessed and being favored in many ways and not use that to then judge other people.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because you had your daughter at a young age. Do you think that pushed you harder?
I think so.
Yeah. I always wonder that because, you know, I feel like maybe when you have like something that alters your course in life, like you're out on a mission to prove something.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm the underdog. Watch this.
Watch it. Y'all think y'all thought it was over? Okay, don't believe it, just watch. Right.
Yeah, you're not, okay.
Yeah. So I always thought that like that was part of that journey. So what do you think you learned most from being a young mother?
perseverance, I think, is the biggest thing, and seeing something beyond yourself. So a lot of motivation to go to class or to, keep pursuing was because I understood that I had someone else in life that was looking to me and depending on me, and not so much financially, right? Because I wasn't in a position to really financially, when she was younger. I didn't graduate till she was 4. Right. So my parents, and again, I had the village. When they say it takes a village, I definitely had a village. But knowing and appreciating and I wanted my daughter to admire me the way I admired my parents.
I love that. Now, I have to ask you a real question. Okay. And this is really an off-script moment. You can just say you don't want to answer it and we can move on. But do you think that there were people, friends, people in your circle, and even family that made assumptions about you?
Oh, definitely.
Because you were a young mom? What do you think their assumptions were?
I had people tell me, just be, you don't have to go to college. Like, take a trade. Like, you're not going to be able to finish college with a kid. Or, usually when girls have one kid, they have multiple kids. Several people told me that. And I was like, well, this is odd. Right. How did this become? Definitely friends who, when you grow up a certain way, like my parents, we were middle class, right? But I think sometimes people kind of like to see if they think you're on the downfall. If they think that people assume sometimes you think you're up here.
And so that was like knocking.
And so it's like,
taking
she thought she was
out of your belt, taking the wind out of your sail.
That's the city. Because Mobile's small. So in New York, if you're the city council, maybe not, but in Mobile, everyone knew my dad was a city councilman. Plus he pastored this church. So I think there were some people I can definitely remember, even in the church, that I think gloated. And they thought,
that's unfortunate.
But your daughter's, 16 and pregnant. But it was that goes back to again of, and I still have that attitude to this day. You underestimate me, like, I think that's a problem for you, not for me.
That's to be clear. Okay, friend, you have built an amazing career. I want to put some things on the record for you. So what I try to do is make sure that we give people their flowers. And, the really lovely thing I think we're going to talk about is, like, you are the hero in so many stories.
Oh, thank
you are. And so I think, it'll be fun to talk about just life. I do want to get into, what has kept you grounded, including having other people in the profession that have kept you grounded. But before we do that, let me just put some things on the record. You ready?
Friend, I'm ready.
And you can tell me if this is correct, if I missed something, and make any corrections that you need to. You ready?
Ready.
All right. Ashley T. Johnson doesn't just break barriers. She rebuilds the systems behind them. As the executive managing director to the Office of the Private Sector at the FBI headquarters, she's the Bureau's primary bridge to Fortune 500 companies and the nation's critical infrastructure. It's the latest chapter in an 18-year FBI career marked by historic firsts and institutional transformations. In September 2024, Ashley became the first woman and the first Black woman to lead the FBI's St. Louis field office as special agent in charge. But making history is just a part of her story. She's created systems that didn't even exist. The FBI's first psychological services unit, the Atlanta Development and Leadership Council for Diversity and Inclusion, and the Bureau's inaugural Airport Security Intelligence Unit at the world's busiest airport. As section chief in international operations, she managed partnerships across 96 countries and navigated multi-million-dollar budgets with the same precision she brought to leading domestic terrorism and civil rights units. Ashley's path to federal law enforcement began in 2007 as a special agent investigating civil rights and white-collar crimes in New Orleans. That early work earned her the Director's Award for Distinguished Service and the Assistant Attorney General's Excellence in Civil Rights Investigations Award. But before the FBI, Ashley was a probation officer, a social worker, and an adjunct professor, roles that taught her something that the Bureau's training never could. Justice isn't just about enforcement, it's about understanding people. With degrees in criminal justice, sociology, and social work, Ashley brings an uncommon perspective to law enforcement. She's a mother, a preacher's daughter, a woman who spent nearly 2 decades proving that the rooms that were not designed for us are exactly the rooms that we should be in.
Definitely.
How does that feel, friend? You've done so much.
You know, it's hard to, like, you realize it, then it's kind of like, And every now and I think that's something, going back to your first, like, women just with friendships and just themselves, and like sometimes acknowledging, like, yeah, that's a long way from the 16-year-old. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long way from, like, I remember when we first started our careers, we worked in a trailer in the back of a community correction center
With barbed wire.
Around the building.
Yeah.
I mean,
Making
$2.28. $2.28
with degrees. We had graduated.
And that was for the month, by the way. And so, I mean, I just think you have done you've had such an amazing career. And I remember when I was looking at, like, Black Enterprise and all of these different, like, national media outlets were talking about my friend. And I was like, they were like, special agent in charge, Ashley Johnson. I was like, oh, that's my friend. I think, the extraordinary thing about this is, like, I am just so excited that my friend get to be, like, such an amazing force in the world. And I'm so proud of you. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to sit down, because I think it's important for other people to hear your story. And I think it's good for sisters to be able to say, no, my sister is the bomb. Really. You really are.
I feel the same way.
This is your day.
Thank you, friend.
I want to get into, like, some of the amazing things that you've done, including, as I said, being a hero to a family, but really to a city, and the story behind that. But I do want to talk about the pieces of you that people don't get to see. Are there moments when you have thought about if you are successful, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, if you're on the right path? Has that ever crossed your mind?
Daily. All the time.
Right.
Maybe not daily, but definitely often.
Yeah.
Is a better, because, when you're working a case, or you're in the business of justice, justice comes in many forms.
That's true.
And sometimes when I was a social worker, when you're working with an abused child, let's say a child has been abused by his or her parent, justice may be getting that child out of the home for the system.
Yeah.
But that child still wants to be with his or her mother. And that mother, whatever issues, or father, whatever issues the two of them may have, they still want to be with their child. Yeah. So what is justice? Yeah. So it can become overwhelming because your efforts depend on a system working. So it's not you as an individual being able to, deliver what you think can make someone whole. It becomes part of a bigger system. So now you rely on an entire system, an entire community, and others to have the same perception or the same belief that you have. And that can be hard to manage sometimes.
I know we're going to talk about the Henry Glover case, but what do you think is the worst type of case that you've seen? I know you can't talk about it exactly, but, like, has there been, like, one case that you were like, it stuck with you forever?
I think when the evidence doesn't meet the burden of proof. And there have been instances when you may have your heart of hearts, but you believe this person is guilty. But maybe the evidence
just won't lead you there.
Doesn't mount to that. And you have to live with that fact that, someone may continue to be in a situation, or there's a perpetrator, on the streets that will likely continue to perpetrate, and you don't have the power, or you don't have what's needed to end that. That can be a lot. Yeah. And feeling like communities of people sometimes depend on you. And like you said, we were probation officers. And one thing I learned from that, and it wasn't a case, but just dealing with people, I always got the younger offenders. I guess because I was young. I was 21, 22. Yeah. So I would always get people who were 21, 22 as well. And part of probation, a lot of times is they would have to get their GED if they didn't have it, or they would have to get a job. And I would sit down with individuals to fill out a job application.
And they couldn't.
And they couldn't.
Yeah, I remember that.
They literally didn't understand what's your mother's maiden name. And they I don't even know what that means. But they were so talented and they were so gifted. And you would see them at 18, 19, 20 years old 8th, 9th grade education, now they're wrapped into this drug life. They pleaded guilty to a felony.
Yeah.
They don't realize what that means.
That's
like, you don't finish probation.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. And so you saw these young, I'm going to say kids now because I'm older, but at the time you saw these young, particularly young Black men who went into a system just ignorant. Mm-hmm. And no matter what I did or how much I attempted to help them, there were circumstances that I wasn't a part of that still sometimes led them to prison.
Yeah.
And so that was hard sometimes because I knew them as a person.
Yeah.
And I had gotten to know them as individuals outside of whatever this crime that they've been convicted of. And so seeing them still wrapped in that system or, later killed or later going to prison, that's a lot to bear as well.
You know what was the hardest part of like working in that space when we worked in like the probation piece was really the disconnect between people who were making decisions about the people that we had to manage and their real life. Like there were times, I think we both agree, like there were times when you would see someone who would get in trouble for like court fees or fines and stuff like that. And they just didn't have it. I mean, it just wasn't available. Like it wasn't there. Or you saw someone who tried to put on their Sunday's best to come to court because they wanted to impress the judge and make sure that they were not judged as like a bad person for the rest of their life. And then the judge had a misperception of like, oh, you got on creased pants, you got on money. Not knowing that culturally, creasing your pants and wearing a nice shirt was a sign of respect.
Right.
It's like those moments I don't think I will ever forget, like I think both of us were trying to be like the go-between between these two worlds that
and trying to make
couldn't communicate with each other.
Or you had ignorance of the law. People have that phrase a lot. There was a case or individuals, not a case, but an individual. So, when you plead guilty to a case, you have to allocute, or the prosecution reads your charges, you have to say, I'm guilty or not, or guilty in this case, because you're pleading guilty to probation. And there was a guy named David. And they read his charges, and I remember this like yesterday. I think you've heard me say, he's walking out of the Exxon gas station on Spring Hill Avenue, which is right by my dad's church. So this could have been my brother,
could have been
any church member, my dad, anybody.
Yeah.
And they say, David's walking out of the church. The police search him, and he has marijuana in his pocket. So this is late 90s, so marijuana is not legal. And I'm the only one, fresh out of criminal justice 101, right? And I'm thinking, but why did they search him? Like, what was the probable cause to search him? And the prosecutor didn't ask. The defense attorney didn't ask. The judge didn't ask. And David's like, guilty. And I'm thinking, but why did they search you? And that's what really kind of launched, kind of like you have a lot of people. Now, did he have the marijuana? He said he did, right? Or they found it.
But there's a whole set of principles that you have to go through to get you to the point where you can search him.
Your rights were violated.
Yeah.
No one could tell you why you just literally walked out of a gas station.
Do you think, it's really interesting because I think now, like, there are so many people who have, like, popped up kind of trying to train people about what their rights are. You can get on, I've seen it on YouTube, and I've seen, like, lawyers doing trainings and stuff like that. I don't think I saw that back in the day. Do you think that's critical to people being able to navigate a system that wasn't intended for them? Or was intended to be there for them, but just knowing your rights?
I think there's more education. Or you think it's a lot of
misinformation?
I think you have the internet, you have, like social media, so I think more so than 99, 2000, when we first started doing it. But I still think when you start talking about a system, especially like probation or community service, I think a lot of times they just don't want to go to jail. And you say,
and they
plead
will plead guilty to anything as long as they are going home.
As long as they're going home. And in the background, you're like, no. Yeah. But you're also not in their situation.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
So that's one of the imbalances, I think, of the criminal justice system, and people who really care, not just about the system, but the people who are in the system. that's a hard task.
So let me tell you this. I remember, being in the justice space, and both of us have been doing this for a long time. You've been doing it in the law enforcement space. I've been doing more on the program and policy side. But I remember having nightmares about going into these rooms because they are very male dominated rooms. Like, it is so male. This space is just very hard to navigate sometimes. And I remember having like a male mentor that would try to tell me yeah, Yolanda, you have to spread out, or
I remember you telling me that
you
like
have
men
to take
up space.
room. He was like, you got to take up room and take up space. And I would just be like, what? Why do I have to do all of these things? If I come prepared, I come ready to go, I understand what the mission is. Why do I have to play all of these other games?
Right.
What do you think has been like the thing you've had to learn in very male dominated environment?
That being smart enough or being prepared enough is not enough. Not to move to another level.
Being smart enough
or prepared enough
and prepared
is sometimes not enough. Because I'm by nature an introvert, right? And I'm one of those people, I feel like if I show up, I do what I'm supposed to do, I should be able to just pack up my stuff and go home. No, sometimes you got to go to happy hours. Sometimes, you have to learn. People want to know you on a personal level.
That's right.
And I think sometimes, particularly me, I won't say all women, but particularly me, you were taught, like, you work hard, you put it, and that is enough. And sometimes it's not. But being the only woman in these spaces, it's very awkward because then you get the reputation of the opposite. Oh, she's always at happy hour, and then there's these innuendos. I remember I would go into meetings, everyone's shaking hands and it'll get to me and people want to hug. And I'm like, well, what are we hugging about? We're discussing national security.
Right. What's different about
what
me?
Is the embrace?
Yeah.
And you realize, and so you have to and I think that when women get this reputation of being, angry or, other terms.
It's called boundaries.
And you have to, and then I looked younger, right? Particularly when I started, right? Yeah. I didn't look, like the typical FBI agent. Yeah. We're just being honest, right? And so that sometimes played in my favor and sometimes it played against me where people didn't take me as serious or I had to elevate my voice to be heard. I remember one time there was a meeting when I was in an office and we're sitting around and I'm looking at the watch and I'm like, well, what time does the meeting start? And they're like, well, we're waiting on the agent. I'm like, well, who else is coming? Because I'm it. You're the agent?
Oh, they were waiting on you?
Oh, we're so sorry. They were waiting on me. They were waiting on the agent. And I'm like, I'm your agent. This is it. All you got, boo. And, we're so sorry. And once they realized that, they were very respectful. Yeah. But I do think that you have to be aware of, like for me, like I said, if you look younger, I had to learn to be more affirmative in my speech. I had to be more firm in how I shook hands, how I taken up space. Yeah. Those are some of the things. And I don't think it's taking you out of your femininity or who you are, but you do have to adapt to a culture.
It is beautiful when you get to show up as your full self. I will say that. But you don't always get to do that in these environments.
That is such a powerful statement. I tell people, that work for the FBI has a culture. And when people say, well, I just want to be me, but being an FBI agent or employee is part of who you are. But that's actually, so an FBI agent is part of my identity. So you can't say, I can come to the FBI any kind of way, because I would just want to be Ashley. When I badge in, they're not really interested in Ashley.
They're interested in
Special Agent Johnson, right? And I have to accept that. And you have to, now I'm not saying lose yourself, lose your morals, lose your values, because I think that's what attracts you to that type of work.
Of course.
But you do have to understand that you're entering into a culture and you're entering into a set of beliefs. And while not losing yourself, you have to adapt yourself. Yeah. I think that's important to understand.
Yeah, I think that's really important. One of the things I always talk about is being authentic. And I just will tell you, I said this with another podcast guest and I I stick to it even though it doesn't sound good. Okay. When I show up in spaces, particularly in workspaces where I know there is an element of culture that might be different than myself, I typically will give, I will give 100% of my effort for the job, but I only give you about 20% of who I am as an individual, because I am code switching and monitoring how I'm showing up in an environment. And for a lot of people, they say, well, I would never do that. Also, if we're really honest, if we just talking off script, you gotta do that. I won't say for everybody, but it has been virtually impossible for me to move to these executive levels without monitoring how much of myself I infuse into the environment.
So think about this. Do you think Muhammad Ali showed up in every aspect of his life as a boxer? He couldn't have been angry and aggressive like that in all,
every
to make
day,
deals
and
or
everything.
Or think about an aggressive football player or whomever they may be. That's their persona on the field, right? And you have to have a certain level of aggression. You have to have a certain level, but then there's a part of you that's reserved that may be different. But you do have to understand and adapt. And you have to be flexible and understanding. When you're in a work environment, you're in an environment. So there has to be some cohesiveness for you to be accepted and for you to really push forward the things that you want to push forward. You know, you read off some of the things. I never could have done those things had I just been, I rejected everything that anyone told me I could or couldn't do. I had to give sometimes. I had to learn sometimes to just say, okay, and take on that old persona. There's a time and a place. Yeah. Where you can speak. You don't always speak at every table. And sometimes people don't understand that. I had a boss, love for me to advise him. But I learned quickly, he didn't want me to advise him in the meeting with everyone else because he saw that as correction.
Private. That's right.
So I thought that was, But I realized too, I wasn't going to get some of the things I wanted to push forward. It was going to become him versus me, and he was the boss.
Right.
So he was going to win.
Right.
Right. So I had to adapt. Okay, this is his style. He wants me. And that was okay because you have to think of the long-term goal.
Because you're playing chess.
You're playing chess.
You're not playing checkers.
Right. And you have a bigger objective.
That's right.
And if you're truly in this kind of line of work, if you're truly working for the people and you're really trying to get things where you can make a difference in other people's lives, you have to put your ego aside.
Yeah. Before we get into the story that I really, I'm dying to get into around Henry Glover, I just want to ask you, as I went through my career, I felt like this huge sense of need to bring people along, right? And it wasn't necessarily like people that I knew, but I felt like it was my responsibility to infuse into my workspaces people who were amazing, but would have never gotten the chance unless I was there. What's the level of responsibility you feel to other people, bringing people along?
You have to have a maturity and a boldness to understand who can come. You can't bring everyone to the same party. We go back to being a preacher starter. My mother would always say, you had your church friends, your work friends, and your friends. Friends. And they shouldn't all come together sometimes.
That's right.
Your church friends don't need to know your neighborhood friends all the time. Right. Or even your work friends, right? Because sometimes your work friends become your boss. Yeah. Or they become other individuals. I think that you have to understand what is someone's what is their passion. Yeah. And if I bring you on this journey with me, are you going to help me grow or are you going to set me back? And that's a true evaluation. And that is understanding where someone is.
And also the role they need to play. You're bringing them in, but the role they have to play in order to maintain in that space.
When you look at a lot of successful people sometimes and they tell their stories, a lot of times they lose because they have attempted to just think, okay, I've got to bring everybody along. And that's not to leave anyone hungry, right? Or to leave, but you can't invest in everyone's, brainchild idea. Everyone is made to work in the FBI.
And everybody can't eat at the table.
Everyone cannot eat at that table.
That table.
Yeah. You have to understand what is the adult table and who needs to
sit at
the other table. won't say kids, but
the
there's
other
another table.
Well, there were only 2 tables when we had Thanksgiving dinner.
Well, there's only 2 tables.
Let me tell you something. I want to just tell you this, and you can respond if you want. Interestingly enough, working in the justice space has been a real interesting dynamic. My father is also a lifetime law enforcement. And I just remember my dad being the county law enforcement officer that really always thought about, like, people make mistakes and people have to do things in their life that don't necessarily define who they are long term. Right. Now, the truth of the matter is, and my dad allows me to say this all the time, is that I grew up kind of poor. So like we didn't grow up with, I didn't grow up with all of like the silver spoons that people might think. But I remember very, very discreetly, there was a young man, one of my younger friends, who went to school with me. And I remember I had to pay for lunch, right? So that means we just had a little bit more than the rest of the folks, right? And it wasn't much, but it got complicated paying for it every day. And I remember not having lunch money a couple times. And this young man who was a neighborhood pharmacist, right?
Pharmaceutical
representative. He was a pharmaceutical representative of his own company. That
is now closed.
That is now closed.
That is now closed.
Yeah, he's changed his life. He moved into a new business.
Yes.
And he paid for my lunch.
Yeah. Because
I didn't have it. And I remember that, like, that was the first moment that I had to like be confronted with this idea of good and bad. And how even when you think someone is doing something bad, how they're using it for good. I mean, I had to eat. Now, he could have just been like, sad for you that your dad is, law enforcement,
right?
Starved. Yeah. But, he was my friend, and I remember him doing that. And so, are there moments in your life where you've had to like navigate being in law enforcement, but seeing good in people because they're not necessarily always their circumstance?
Definitely. I can remember, taking me back to my probation days at drug court, where I don't have to go back to drug court. I can go to my cousin. I have a cousin, Jeffrey. Jeffrey was killed in 2008. I love Jeffrey beyond words. Like it just makes me sad to even say his name. But Jeffrey was on drugs. So I saw Jeffrey steal from family. Yeah. I saw him, do things that, he shouldn't have done. But I knew his heart. And I knew who he was before the drugs and when he wasn't on the drugs. Right. But I think that helped me get into this profession because I saw Jeffrey a lot of times throughout my career. And I understood, but I also knew Jeffrey's story. And I also sometimes I'm like, I would have been on drugs too, had some of these things happen to me. And so it's true empathy, like being able to understand. Like we talk about being a single mother, I will never judge a single mother, right? Because I recognize, and it's recognizing when you have favor and when you have a blessing. And I think that's when people become judgmental, when they want to put themselves as if they've done something special. No, God just put you in a situation where maybe you didn't have to do that. But you did something. Yeah. And you've done something. Yeah. Maybe you didn't go to that far or to that extreme, but there's been something in your life where you had to make a good or bad choice. And it wasn't the best one sometimes. And he spared you for some reason. And so, yes, I think my cousin Jeffrey specifically, seeing him and loving him despite bad things that I saw him do and being hurt that he was on drugs, still understanding, but he was a great person. And it is hard to separate that sometimes. Yeah. But it's true. It's good versus evil. We all have it to a degree. Right? Not all of us have done things that, we would be ashamed if the cameras were there at that particular time and they saw. But you forgive yourself and you have to extend that. And you have to realize that people make choices. Some people's choices have longer and heavier consequences than others.
Okay, friend, I want to talk about the story behind Henry Glover, Katrina, all of those things. You ready? Now, Before we get into Henry Glover's story in the case specifically, I want to talk a little bit about the environment. So Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans in 2005.
Yes.
And what followed was catastrophe. It wasn't just a natural disaster of sorts. It was literally a breakdown of the whole entire city systems, including the justice infrastructure. Can you give me a picture of before we get into the case, just give me a picture of the environment you think kind of post-Katrina leading up to the conversation about Henry Glover?
Desperation. I think that I wasn't there in 2005, but just hearing the story, seeing the pictures, talking to people and seeing them literally reliving in real time. The best way I could sum it up is that was my first time. If I had to define desperation, I would use that as an example.
My understanding is that Henry Glover was one of the people who were part of this idea of being desperate, trying to find their way, kind of post-Katrina. I don't know the story, so you can help me develop it. But on September 2nd, 2005, Henry Glover was shot by a New Orleans police officer. He, with his friends, my understanding, was searching for supplies. Walk us through that story that day and what happened as a result of this desperation.
So Hurricane Katrina happened on August 29th. Is when the Katrina made landfall. And then, as we know, they survived to a great extent, the landfall of Katrina, but then the levees broke. So that's when the true catastrophe really happened, when the levees broke, because they thought they'd survive that. Henry happened to live on the West Bank in the Algiers section of New Orleans, which was not affected by the levees breaking. But they didn't have electricity, no grocery stores, any of that. So even though they had stayed through Katrina, they weren't affected by the floods that resulted from the levees. They realized, he and his family realized, we can't stay here anymore, right? There's no food, there's no lights, there's no water, there's no way we're going to get help. So that particular day, September 2nd, Henry and his brother-in-law, Bernard Calloway, and the rest of his family decide, hey, we've got to leave New Orleans, right? His mother and brother had left the day before going to Houston. So they were like, we got to follow them. His sister had a small sedan of some sort, and it wasn't large enough to house all the family plus their belongings, because she had a family, Henry had a family, his brother had a family as well. And so Henry, there was a Firestone truck station or Firestone store. He went inside, took the keys, took the truck. Don't try to sugarcoat. He took the truck from the Firestone. As he's driving back to his apartment, to load up the family's.
But just for context, though, he took the truck, but also this is when spaces were abandoned.
Oh yeah, completely abandoned. Yes, no.
So even though he took the truck,
right,
these are in spaces where people had abandoned everything.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there was no workers there. There was no threat. There wasn't, he didn't strong arm anyone. He goes back to his apartment complex to get his family. On his way back, a friend and his brother's girlfriend, they say, hey, we left these items at Tuesday morning, in a shopping cart. Can you go back and get them since you have a truck? They make it seem like they just couldn't carry it all, right? They failed to tell Henry that they left the basket because there was a police officer. So this was like a shopping center. And on the second floor balcony was like a police substation. And so you had 2 police officers that were there guarding that station to make sure no one came and got records or computers or anything like that. So the friend and the sister-in-law failed to say, hey, the police ran us off. So Henry according to his brother-in-law Bernard, turns the truck around, goes back to the back of the Tuesday morning store. According to his brother-in-law, he backs the car up to the bed of the truck. He backs it up to the basket. Henry gets out on the driver's side, lights a cigarette. Bernard gets out and makes a joke to Henry about, oh, you're going to just sit there and smoke while I have to get all the stuff. Bernard says as he loads the first suitcase, because there was a suitcase, as he puts the first suitcase in the bed of the truck, he hears police get out. And he said Henry runs left, he runs right, and then he hears a pow. And so he said he's running the opposite of Henry. He looks back, he sees Henry running, then he sees him stumble, and then he sees him fall.
Okay.
So of course he, takes a recourse and he goes back towards Henry. Then, he runs back to the apartment complex, tells Henry's family Henry's been shot. At this time, really not knowing it was the police who had shot him. But he heard police get out, but he's really not computing the two. He's not sure
who shot him.
The family comes out. By this time, you have, we call him the Good Samaritan. His name is William Tanner. He just happens to be driving down the street. They flag him down. Hey, can you help our brother, our family? He's been shot. So they put him in the back of the car, of William Tanner's car. William Tanner remembers, and most of America, if you've ever watched a Katrina story, the police had blocked off the Gretna Bridge, where they were not letting individuals over. So they couldn't get to the hospital. So William Tanner remembers, I just saw police at this elementary school. So his mind, if police are there, EMTs should be there or nearby. Takes Henry to the school, opposed to when the men drive to the school. Mr. Tanner, by this time, Henry's brother is in the car, Edward King and Bernard Calloway, his brother-in-law. They're pulled out of the car. They say they're assaulted by police. Henry remains in the car the entire time. Shot. About 2 or 3 hours later, an officer approaches them. They have flares in their hand. He gets into the driver's seats of Tanner's car. The next time they see the car, and/or Henry is on the side of the levee and the car is completely burned.
Wait a minute. So he stayed in that car for 2 to 3 hours shot?
He remained in that car. He was never rendered any type of aid. It had become, and this is in court records, almost like a spectacle. So you have to remember, this is 2005. So there are no camera phones the way they are now.
Right.
So you had individuals taking Polaroid pictures. If you remember, of Henry.
Of Henry in the car?
Of Henry in the car, laid on his stomach with his, So unfortunately, it's still on the internet to this day. But yeah, it had become almost of a spectacle. And the rationale that you heard a lot of times was, well, he was looting.
Yeah, but why didn't law enforcement as first responders render him any aid?
A lot of officers testified that it had become a kind of us versus them. And so Henry was seen as a looter. They were seen as looters. And at that time, stealing equaled the death penalty.
And Tuesday Morning, for the record, is a small knick-knack store.
Correct.
It's not like a high-end store.
And there weren't TVs or
You're
refrigerators,
candles,
socks.
Yeah.
These were the things that were found in this. When I said he lifted the suitcase, they had taken survival tools. There was nothing where you could say, oh, they were just, looting for the purpose of stealing. But it was actually things that anyone would need to survive during those times.
Why leave his body in the car? Why burn the car?
I think over time, during the course of those 2 hours, there was still radio traffic. It had become clear that he had been shot by a police officer.
That was David Warren?
David Warren. Mm-hmm. That David Warren was the officer on the second floor of that shopping center. Mm-hmm. He had shot him. When the two officers, so there was another female officer, Linda Howard, with David Warren that day. She'd called on the radio or on a Nextel to Pernella Simmons, who was the sergeant at the time, reported what she saw. So as per, she tells her they just left in a white car, which is Mrs. Tanner's car. Linda Howard tells Pernella Simmons they just drove him off. David just shot somebody. They just drove him off in a white car.
I see.
By this time, it also comes across the radio that a white car has just arrived to Havens Elementary School. Havens Elementary School is where the police are. So the sergeant puts the two together because they're only like a mile or so apart. Mm-hmm. Okay, the white car because no one's driving.
This is the same car.
It's got to be and how many cars are driving around with an individual in the back? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. She reports to her sergeant her lieutenant and the captain, hey, I believe that's the same person that David Warren shot at the substation. They tell her, no, it's not.
Oh, so this was a cover up from the start.
This was a cover from it. There were 3 Black women that were the precipice. Linda Howard, Pernilla Simmons, and Kiala Bell, who was with Pernilla Simmons. She was a rookie. She had just graduated. So she happened to be with the sergeant when she got that call.
And they were trying to be supportive of like, hey, something is wrong. We need to render help. But they were kind of disregarded.
I don't know if they said render help.
Okay.
But they were saying, hey, these are connected. This guy, it's the same guy that was just at the substation that David Warren shot. And Pernilla Simmons was told they're not connected.
And so they set this car on fire to cover up the shooting.
Yes.
But if he was looting and he was actually doing something wrong, why would you have to cover up?
Because you still can't shoot someone for looting and running away with no weapon.
So let's talk about the investigation. You went to New Orleans because you weren't in New Orleans at this time.
Right.
So you were called into New Orleans for what reason?
So that was my first office. So out of the academy, I got assigned New Orleans. So when I went to the academy in 2007, I went in 2007, but I graduated in April of 2008. So New Orleans was my first office. And Mr. Tanner, the Good Samaritan, as I call him, he came into the FBI office. Back then, I don't know if you can still do it in every office since COVID, but you could actually walk into the FBI office and give a complaint.
And he
came to the office. I happened to be the newest agent on the squad. So it was like, hey, you're up. It wasn't like this orchestrated. It was like, hey, we have this complaint. And I go down and Mr. Tanner starts telling me the story as I've related to you. And
he just never let the story go.
He had to continue to pay for his car. The car that was burned
was his car.
They took his car with Henry still in it and burned it. And he could not report the car stolen to his insurance because his insurance said it was in police custody. So for 4 years,
he was paying for a car.
He continued to pay for his car.
That a police officer took from him with the shot man in the back, burned it, and he was still paying payments.
He was still paying it. And when he got his title, he wanted his reimbursement.
Of course. And so he came to you because he was trying to reconcile.
Correct.
And it just happened that it was part of an investigation. Okay, so tell me, so when you were called in to do this is very interesting because you're now law enforcement. You're part of the Blue Shield at this point, right? And now you're being called in and this case lands on your desk and now you got to investigate the police. What was that like?
That was tough. I was called a traitor to my face. not, I didn't hear that. Or how do you feel about, betraying the police? I was asked that a couple of times. While it was disheartening and it was scary sometimes, right? To just hear, because being a probation officer or being a case officer like I was a drug court was different than, I didn't carry a gun then. I wasn't a shield carrying, gun carrying law enforcement officer. So this was still relatively new to me. There was a fear in the sense of, not a physical fear, but an acceptance, right? That, oh my God, here I go again. I'm being I'm the different girl once again in a space.
Did you feel like your life was under any type of threat?
I never felt that. I never felt like my life was in any type of jeopardy, but I felt like that preacher's kid again. I was different. Once again, I'm different from the rest of the crew. And our whole school, there were several people working these types of cases. But again, so at that time, I'm the only Black female on my squad. There may be 2 of us at that time that were in the New Orleans office. So you're standing out anyway. And now as a new agent still on probation, you've got a case that's making the news every day. And that's a lot. People would say, I hope you don't get fired, for not being able to handle all that evidence. That's a lot of evidence. So just that kind of burden. And that was kind of one kind of thing. That just made me, back to what I said earlier, okay, now I've got to be meticulous about everything. But the thing that really, I think, drove me, it was fearful, it was fear yet motivation, was the Glover family.
Yeah,
it was very clear
to talk about them.
That, they were dependent on me to help
So
them.
let's talk a little bit about the family. But before we talk about the family, I just want to be clear. So when you came into New Orleans, the case wasn't being investigated.
No.
But there were people who were clear that something had happened, that there had possibly been a shooting. There was a burned out car, and Henry Glover was nowhere to be seen. Like, no one knew where he was.
Not so much in the FBI, in the New Orleans Police Department.
In the police department.
In the police department, definitely. In the FBI, there may have been, because you have task force officers, so you have New Orleans police officers attached to FBI squad. So there were people who heard rumblings, but there were rumors. Like I said, there were so many pictures, so many rumblings about what had happened to him. People knew, they had heard the story, but that case kind of like unveiled, this just wasn't some kind of myth. Because there were a lot of myths that happened during Katrina, things that were said that turned out, after you investigated them, they didn't happen the way they were reporting in the news or the way people believed. But this was one of the quote unquote myths that was actually true.
So the Glover family don't know where Henry is.
They do not know where Henry is.
And they haven't been told by the police where he might be, where his body might be, if he survived, anything.
Here's the kicker. The police station is across the street from the Levee where Henry Glover's body was. That car, we towed that car in 2009. Henry Glover's body had been over there since September 2nd, 2005.
In front of the police department.
So there's a levee.
Yes.
So on the other side of that levee, with Miss Glover, it was the Saturday after Thanksgiving. So he was killed September 2nd. She comes back from Houston. Her niece takes her to the police station. She's reporting her son missing to the same officer. So she testified, or so she said, that told Pernella Simmons they weren't connected. There's a black officer there. I cannot recall his name offhand. And he is the one that put Henry in as a missing persons report.
Finally.
But her son is literally across the street. And she has no idea.
Were there reports about him?
Only the missing persons report. When Linda Howard was asked, was it a good shooting? She said no. That was it.
Yeah.
Pernella Simmons, the sergeant, was asked to write a police report months later.
And was the police report?
She alleged that her report was altered.
Wow. This was a very deep fabrication and miscarriage of justice.
In every sense of the word.
In every sense of the word. Let's talk about the family. You went to New Orleans. You met with the Glover family. I think I came to a book signing where you were talking about how devastated they were, but also very much didn't think that you would be able to do anything for them. Walk me through walking into their home, into the home of Henry Glover's family. What was that like? What was their perception of you? And what did you feel they needed at that moment?
So the funniest part when I walked in, so in 2008, or this was 2009 by now, I was very skinny. So Miss Glover, I'll never forget, she was cooking something. She was like, well, baby, you need to eat.
She wanted to feed you.
She didn't
Classic Southern.
She was like, well, baby, you need, first of all, let's get you something to eat. So I always tell that story because it made me feel like, okay,
it's like family.
Yes, it was just like family. But Miss Glover was she was just sad. And I pray to this day, I haven't spoken to her in a while, that there was just, you ever met somebody and there's just a sadness?
Yeah.
Even when they laugh,
you can tell
there's a sadness
behind it. Yeah.
She had that sadness. The whole family had a sadness to them, but hers was consistent. Even when she laughed, like his sister Patrice, when she laughed, you could feel her laughter. His brother, you could feel his laughter. You can feel a different spirit. And his mother, it was just always so sad to me to be able to have to tell them this. And so the first time I went to their home, she was there and her son Edward was there. I had met Edward before, but this particular time, and I've told this story many times before because it still sticks out in my head. I'm talking to Ms. Glover. She's kind of seated where you are, and then Edward is seated in a love seat to the side. And I can feel, and as I'm explaining to her, like the court process, like how an investigation works. So, we have to do this, this, and that. And she's listening. But he's kind of like just staring at me. And so finally I turned to him and I said, well, Edward, do you have a question? And he was like, no. I was like, are you okay? Is there something wrong? And he was like, I can't believe you're here. And I said, what do you mean you can't believe I'm here? I said, because I'd met him before. I said, I told you I was going to come. And he's like, I can't believe that the FBI is investigating. This kind of has been happening to us. They grew up in the Fisher Projects. This has always happened to us. And
so they had
now
resigned,
the FBI, and I thought to
this
myself,
was just normal for them.
because I have a brother.
Yeah.
And if I thought the police shot, burned, and then obstructed the investigation, I could just see myself on like worldwide news, right? Mm-hmm. They made that one police report I told you about, and that was it.
That was it.
That was it. And so
because it sounds like they felt like they were helpless.
They felt like that, and that they didn't matter.
Yeah.
And that was the first time, and maybe I was naive, I don't know, but that was the first time that I guess it hit me that there's a segment of the population of people who have just resigned to the fact this is what happens to us.
And they are not seen.
And that was my motivation, because that bothered me. That bothered me a lot.
That's really sad. Do you think that Henry Glover's mother or grandmother, was it his grandmother?
His mother.
His mother knew that he had died with such level of violence?
She learned. Well, she knew, because Henry was, they finally had a funeral for him, and there was no body, there were bones. So they had to bury bones, not, they can have a normal funeral for him. So she definitely knew over time that her son was burned in a vehicle. So brutal.
That's so brutal. And, I wonder, there's so many families that don't get to get even that level of like closure. When you went through, because just to kind of give perspective, because I know it's such a elaborate story, you did like 300 interviews to get to the truth of what happened to Henry. Do you think that had you not been so committed to getting the truth, that they would have ever gotten any closure?
Oh, definitely. I think that, and this is where I believe God brings people together. I think the team, myself as the agent, and then Tracy Knight, who was the prosecutor, Jared Fishman, who was the DOJ prosecutor. I think we each were determined. And I know it seems not long ago, but in 2005 or in 2007, 2008, you did not have the digital evidence you even have to this day. So talking to people is the only way that I really, and it pulled from my social work background. And I'd like to always say this. During trial, we had about 60 something witnesses on the prosecution side. About half of those were police officers who had.
On the prosecution?
So
there were 60 officers who were willing to say.
About 30. We had 60 witnesses total. About half were police officers.
Who were willing to say.
Who testified on behalf of the prosecution.
That's good.
What they saw, they turned over pictures. They turned over different things. So there was a, hey, this was really messed up. And so you had the cooperation of police. So in the end.
So they even knew it was wrong.
Correct.
And yeah.
You saw community and police come together in that sense. So that's one of the victories you can say, I would say, of the case, is that you had officers, and a lot of them were scared. So when you start to talk, and you mentioned the blue line earlier, and people have this perception, police just stick with the police, for this reason. Sometimes you're just scared. Mm-hmm. And it is a scary feeling to go against, your tribe. Mm-hmm. And that's in sense what sometimes happened. But if it had not been for the cooperation of police, we wouldn't have made this case happen. No.
Do you think there was a racial context to this case?
Definitely. I think the racial context was historically just in New Orleans.
In New Orleans.
If you just look back at the history.
They have a tattered racial
with
history.
Police and the African-American community. New Orleans is the only city, as of then, may change now. You have 2 police officers who were on death row, Black police officers.
Wow.
Who were on death row for murdering other, Black citizens.
Wow.
You have a history of just total distrust in the community. And people will tell you stories after stories of how they grew up and what their feelings were. And the police then have their stories of why they feel the way they felt about the community. So really those interviews, not all of them yielded like this great revelation or evidence, but it was getting to understand how people thought and how did we get to this point.
Yeah. You mentioned that the car that was burned out with his body was across the street from the police department. Why was that? Was that to keep an eye on the car so it would never be uncovered that his body was there? Was it a relic of like, we did this? Like what was
I think it was, so you had, Pernella Simmons.
Or was it like a sign to the other people, don't get out of line because this could happen to you?
I think it was a contradiction between 2 different precincts. So the 4th precinct is the precinct that's across from the levee where the body was taken. The car was originally taken to Havens Elementary where the SWAT team was stationed. So based on interviews, the SWAT team was telling the 4th district, this is your problem. This is your district. The 4th district is saying, hey, they brought this problem to you.
They wanted it out of there.
SWAT basically took them their problem. That sounds very...
Yeah, that sounds crazy.
But it's kind of like, oh, nope. We're going to bring your problem to your backyard.
Really not worried about like bringing the car, but really investigating the case. So let's talk about the family one more time. So how did the family respond when they finally understood what happened and that you were able to help them get to the point of their case being in court and some type of relief being given to them for the death of their loved one?
I think it was a mixed emotion. I think they were conflicted in a way. So by the time it goes to trial, it's 2011. So 6 years have passed. I think you used a great term, they felt seen for the first time or they felt believed because the witnesses were Bernard Calloway and Henry's brother, Edward. So they felt believed, right? That somebody finally believed him and they weren't just discarded as, individuals in society who didn't matter. But at the same time, I didn't walk away feeling that they don't feel that couldn't happen again. I felt that they got lucky, right? It happened during Katrina. But if this happened tomorrow and there's no Katrina,
that's terrible.
The justice or the people, the interest, the media, it may not be there.
Wow.
So I think it was a temporary victory for them. And then they went back to what they consider their everyday life with the same fears and the same being ostracized, feelings of being ostracized as they had before.
Now, walk us through what happened to the officers.
So there were a total of 5 officers that went to trial. In the original, there were 3 officers convicted. David Warren, who shot him, Greg McRae, who burned the body, and then Travis McCabe, who was convicted of altering the report. Travis McCabe appealed. He was granted his appeal. His conviction was thrown out. David Warren petitioned for a new trial. He got the new trial. His argument being that he didn't know about the burning. So to try him with the same people that burned the body prejudiced the jury. Yeah. The judge agreed. So he was granted a second trial. In that trial, he was found not guilty, and he had served about 3 years. So he served 3 years
so
total.
Time served.
Greg McRae, who burned the body, he served the longest term of 17 years.
I guess here's my issue. My issue is trying to differentiate the actions. So if one person can get 17 years for burning the body, the person who shot the person can be acquitted?
The jury believed that the defense said it was self-defense. Even though that he was behind a locked gate on the second floor.
What was the
He
self-defense?
said he thought he saw a weapon in Henry's hand. Even though according to the testimony,
candles.
No, Henry had nothing. Remember, he went on the side of the truck and was smoking a cigarette.
That's right.
And then he So he never he alleged he approached the gate. You had a different jury
The second
trial.
time. Yeah. Okay.
The makeup of the jury was
I won't
different.
ask any questions around that, but I will ask this. Even though there were mixed verdicts, you brought the truth to light, right? You gave a family answers where they weren't even expecting to get answers. And I think in many ways, you gave sight to people who were typically abandoned and not even seen after an egregious action would happen to them. Even though there was a mixed verdict, what do you feel was most important to you in this case?
I think you just summed it up. I think just not, when Edward said to me, I can't believe you're here, there was nothing else that anyone was going to say to me that wasn't going to, even if it had not made it to trial, I was going to overturn every stone, because I felt at that time they deserved that. And going back, to the beginning, like, I knew what it felt like to be judged or ostracized. Maybe not to that extent. So I'm certainly not comparing my situation to, but I knew what that feeling was. And for her, and like I said, I had a cousin that had been killed.
That's right.
And so maybe there was some empathy there in understanding what, I'd seen my aunt, what she'd gone through with losing her son. And so I saw the same thing with Miss Glover. And so it taught me, like, determination. Like, you don't just, and I try to teach newer agents, that as well. I don't care how much technology there is, how much social media there is.
Doesn't replace
you have
human.
to talk to people. And when you talk to people and you establish a connection, they bond with you, you start to see the humanity and you start to get the truth. Most people want to be truthful. Carrying that weight, when I tell you a lot of the officers testified, you had officers had been carrying around pictures or notes or whatever for 3 or 4 years. Like, the burden and the weight that put on them was a lot. And so to finally be able to, like, just talk about it and just not feel you're going to be prosecuted or you're going to be judged or you're a bad officer. You asked a question earlier about, seeing the good in people. One of the officers, Dwayne Sherman, who was on trial, he was acquitted. But Dwayne Sherman, he was described, excuse my language, his nickname was the shit magnet. That whenever he showed up on a scene,
it was going to go
It could be a calm scene. Everybody's,
it would go to
Mr. Sherman shows up.
Go to shit.
But he was on trial. He was acquitted.
Yeah.
But that same Dwayne Sherman, you can find videos of him rescuing people out of the water.
Okay.
So when you talk about seeing, you even see it in policing. You saw this man who had been accused of this
dynamic between
these
what's
horrific
good and
things.
what's bad.
Yeah, but then you also seeing him risking his life to save others. So you have to mitigate that. It's the human behavior and mind is very tricky.
Well, friend, I think that one of the things that Henry Glover's brother probably saw in you was that you don't typically get to see the hero that looks like you. Like, you're not the hero that the movies paint, or that, like, you're not the person that they show with the cape flying in the air. But perhaps for once, the hero gets to look like you.
And I think people discard that. Think about when you watch Family Feud or Wheel of Fortune. In your mind, you side with a contestant or a family based on what some type of likability or similarities. And I think sometimes you just feel like that person's going to understand you. You don't have to decode everything. Funny story. We're in an interview and one of the witnesses says, "Oh, I haven't seen Edward in a minute." And so they're like, "Well, we can just wait here because he'll be back anytime now." I'm like, "Well, no, a minute could mean today or next year." Let's be clear. When is the last time? When do you expect him back?
Yeah.
Have you seen? And that's funny. But, like, even not having to just sit there and decode or from the South. You know,
because you could share a specific language with
where
the
people,
family.
again, they feel hurt and they don't have to feel, you know, like I'm not intelligent or I'm not a professional because I have to use this language. No, just say. But that 6 out of that was the funniest thing. Jared was like, "Well, he said a minute." I'm like, "Well, now I don't know if we want to wait.
You need us to decipher this.
A minute could mean a decade.
I just really think it's so awesome because there are so many I know there are more Glover families in the world than we know, and I say that only because I know there are families that will never get the answers that they deserve and the acknowledgement that someone is there to help. And I just think that's the true hero story in this. All right, so you are the hero. So let's talk about St. Louis, the Lou.
I love St. Louis.
You do?
St. Louis was a cool little city. I had never been to St. Louis.
I've never been to St. Louis.
St. Louis is a cool little city.
For
it
an
really
extended
is.
period of time. I've
it's
only
very
been there
southern.
Like, I drop in and drop out.
It has southern charm to it. It does.
It don't feel southern. Okay, so in 2024, you were appointed special agent in charge of the St. Louis field office. You were the first Black woman to hold that position in history. Man, so what does it feel like? Because again, I remember your face, Ashley, was on every news outlet.
And my brother sent it to me. I'm like, well, where'd you get this?
Every Black.
Who did this? Who did that? Yeah.
I mean, I was just thinking to myself, my friend is a freaking legend.
I did not.
Right. It was beautiful to watch. But just take me to that moment. Do you think that being the first, and we've both been the first in different things, is really hard that we're still...
Yeah, that's like, even a topic.
It's even a thing
in St. Louis.
that people are still being the first, right? That just means that, you know, there's so much more work for us to do. But take me back to that moment, because I feel like that probably was a lot of pressure. Was it exciting, terrifying, both? Like, what was the feeling?
So I was naive enough that I did not even research the St. My office.
Wait a minute. You're making history.
I applied. Had no idea I was making history.
All right.
St. Louis came open. I put I'm like, oh, St. Louis, close to Chicago. Should be great barbecue, I hear, right? So
I love it.
But I did not I didn't research the city and look at all this.
So it wasn't like a motivation.
It wasn't I'm going to make history. You weren't
motivated by
not
being
at all.
The first.
So that I started in late August. So maybe the first week in August, I went there to look for a home. And I stopped by the office. They have what they call Family Day. So a lot of FBI offices have them, kind of like bring your children to work day or whatnot. People kept introducing their children to me, and they kept saying, she's the first woman. And I mean, and it hit me. By the time I'd gone here, someone had told me, you're going to be the first female and the first Black female. Yeah. There had been one Black male before me. Okay. But the first female. And so a lot of women in the office, they were introducing their kids, but it was my assistant special agent in charge. He brought his son into the office and he was like, she's going to be the first female SAC. And he explained to him. And so to me, it dawned on me the significance that adults saw in letting their children know. Even he had a son. Yeah. Letting his son know, because his mom was an agent.
Oh, so that was important.
So it was very important. So it kind of dawned on me the significance of,
it was important to the city too, because there were so many media outlets that were just so excited to see you and welcomed you to the community. I think that was amazing.
Oh, it was, and that's part of the reason I always loved St. Louis. Yeah, that they were and it gives you that home feeling when I say it's kind of like the South, very welcoming, very respectful. Yeah, very wanting to know what do you need from us? How can we make sure you're successful? I got that from so many people, so many regardless of the group, the police department, the city government, and all. So I will always have a special place for St. Louis in my heart.
What is something that you learned from being the first in this space that you had not learned from just, your normal life?
To whom much is given, much is expected. That you go about your day to day and you never think of yourself as, I'm the first. But then it puts in when other people start to tell you, it puts into perspective when we talked about the image or the role that you've accepted, right? No one says, hey, you have to be the special agent in charge. That is a position I applied for. So when you say, hey, I want to take on this responsibility, you've got to accept the responsibility that comes with that. It's not just about running the office or doing press conferences or, meeting with the community. It's also about understanding their expectations of you and how they see you in that role. That's equally as important because you're representing them. And, you don't want to, you can't embarrass them, right?
Yeah.
You can't, and you want to make sure when you show up in how you look, right? You show up in how you represent, how you speak, what you advocate for. So it really put that phrase into light for me.
Yeah.
God has given you a lot. And so there's a lot that's expected of you.
I love that. And so I have two more questions. One, we're going to end on a happy note, but I do have one quick question that I wanted to ask you because you have done a lot, my friend. You are Ashley to me, but you're special agent in charge to some people. You're Agent Johnson to other people. You're a mom. You are daughter, you are trailblazer, you are history maker. What is the one thing you would tell your younger self, your 16-year-old self?
That sometimes you've got to be your own seed, your own photosynthesis, if that makes sense, right? Sometimes we look outside a lot. And sometimes you've got to plant the seed of what you want yourself, and you got to be the sunlight, you got to be the soil, you got to be the fertilizer, the sun, all of it, right? You have to be comfortable with that. And every time you look out for someone to fulfill what you want to become and who you are, you're giving someone else the ability to determine if they water you today. Will I put fertilizer on her? Am I going to whack those weeds? I don't feel like it, right?
You wouldn't depend on it.
But when you've determined, this is my garden, and I'm going to nurture it the way that I want to, I think I would tell myself that don't look outward for people to fulfill what God has put in you. And I think that helps a lot. Because if I had listened to people, love teachers, mom's a teacher, whole family, mostly. Yeah. But people, when they would say, Ashley, major in teaching, it wasn't because they thought I would be a great teacher. They would say, because you'll have the same schedule as your daughter, which is great, right? But you were limiting and telling me I couldn't achieve one thing because I need to, quote unquote, settle for something that was an easier way out. Yeah. And it was like, but that's not what I want to do. Yeah. Loved teaching. I was an adjunct instructor. Loved it. One of my favorite things to do. But I had to learn to nurture myself.
I love that. All right, friends. So this is the one question that I ask. Okay. I try to ask, especially like my good friends, because these are always epiphanies for me. If fear was not a thing, and you could have done anything now I'm thinking about it. If you could have done anything with your life, any career, one of my girlfriends said, she's an elected official, and she's like, I would have been a poker player. She wanted to play poker. But I think I would have been a sports agent. And it was somewhere between a sports agent and an executive producer of movies and things like that. Okay, so if you could have done, and the sports agent is because I love to negotiate. I will negotiate your life away from you. Okay.
Wow.
It's real. I am a master negotiator. It is the one thing I love. But if you had your choice, no fear, and there were no obstacles, what would you do? What would you be doing?
What would I do? So I think I have a very creative side. Okay. I would have really loved to write. I'm a really good writer, write movies or even act.
I love this. Okay.
That is probably one of, I think it's my most hidden talents.
Friend, we could do this.
We could do that.
We could get Shonda Rhimes on the phone.
Or I would be on The View. On a round table.
I would love that.
Yeah, where you can discuss your ideas. Yeah. I would be a baby Sunny Hostin. I love Sunny Hostin.
You do.
I just think she's so intelligent and she articulates herself in but she's fun. Yeah, I would be more risque in putting myself out there to show someone the other kind of creative side.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, friend, this has been good.
I know,
I'm
friend.
so glad that you came through to do this. I know we went all through your whole life, but you know,
I can
you
say I'm on therapy next week. I'm just
yes, girl, you can skip over therapy this week. It has
Save
been
that copay.
I
I'm just
know.
kidding.
It's been such a pleasure, friend. I'm so proud of you, and just keep doing the amazing work that you're doing.
Thank you, Fred. You too.